Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's stay-at-home lecture. Glad to have you here with us today. My name is Tim Nutt. I'm director of the UAMS Historical Research Center, which is the archives department of the UAMS library. And in that regard, our charge is to preserve the institutional records of UAMS. So think of like departmental reports, photographs of the campus, things like that. But we also collect and preserve materials that deal with the history of the health sciences throughout Arkansas. So we might also have materials dealing with a doctor or a dentist, say in Northwest Arkansas or Northeast Arkansas, or any part of Arkansas for that matter, that might not have a connection to UAMS. So we have that sort of twofold mission of preserving the records of UAMS and preserving the history of Arkansas as it deals with the health sciences. So, as I mentioned, we are a part of the UAMS library, or we are located in the library on the UAMS campus in Little Rock. If you're on campus and you would like to come visit with us, I'd love to see you and give you a tour of our facility and show you some of the interesting artifacts that we have in our collection, some of the interesting archival materials, and some of the history, some of the rare books that we have in our collection as well. Our email address is up on your screen right now, hrc@uams.edu. If you'd like to use that avenue to get in touch with us, or you can call me at the phone number on the screen if you'd rather do it that way. As I mentioned, these are the stay-at-home lectures. They're held the first Thursday of every month, and they are sponsored by the Society for the History of Medicine and Health Professions, which is the support organization for the Historical Research Center. And when I say support organization, what I mean by that is they help us out in a number of ways. They help us purchase materials by giving us money. If there's an item that comes up, say on an estate sale or something like that, they will help us purchase those materials. But then they also help us with programming, such as the stay-at-home lectures and other programming throughout the year. We'll have other lectures. Sometimes we'll have receptions, book signings, panel discussions, things like that. So we really appreciate the support that the society gives to us. And if you're interested in joining the society, we'd love to have you as a member. The dues are inexpensive, $15 for an individual, $25 for a family membership. And we also have a student membership level, which is $5. And you do not have to be a student here at UAMS. You could be a high school student if you're interested in the history of medicine. You can be a student at U of A. You could be a student at Washington University in St. Louis, or American University in Washington. So I hope you'll consider joining if you're interested in the history of medicine and the work that we do at the Historical Research Center. If you are interested in joining, the link on your on the page that's up right now, you can go to the long URL, and that will show you or that will take you to the membership page, or you can skip all that and just go to paypal.me/shmhp, and you can just pay your dues directly from there. And I do encourage you to join if you are interested in the history of medicine and like the programming that we have here. As I mentioned, these are held the first Thursday of every month. So next month will be on December 5th. It'll be the last one, obviously, of 2024. And I will be speaking on the career of Dr. G. Thomas Jansen, who is a dermatologist here at UAMS for a number of years. And some of our viewers who are maybe a little bit older may remember Dr. Jansen. And so I hope you'll join me next month on December 5th as we talk about Dr. Jansen's career. The link that you used for this to join this program today will be the same next year, and it's actually the same for every stay-at-home lecture that we do, and it's on the bottom of your screen. But we also send out emails every month before the program to remind you and let you know who the topic and speaker are. So if you don't get those emails and you would like to, you can use that email that I showed you before, hrc@uams.edu, as a way to contact us and ask to be put on the email distribution list. And I'll be happy to do that. So you'll get notifications of the programs that we do. Today, I am happy to have Dr. Taylor Prewitt here. Dr. Prewitt is from Fort Smith, and he earned his BA in English from the University of Arkansas and his medical degree from Washington University. Specializing in cardiology, Dr. Prewitt trained at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and completed a fellowship at Brompton Hospital in London, England. He practiced at the Cooper Clinic in Fort Smith from 1969 to 2003 and served on the boards of St. Edward Mercy Hospital and Methodist Village Senior Living, all in Fort Smith. And today he's going to be talking about a former colleague of his and a friend of his, Dr. Harry P. McDonald. And I know it's going to be a fascinating, interesting look at Dr. McDonald's career in Fort Smith. So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Prewitt. I'm going to stop the share on my end. And Dr. Prewitt, if you will hit share, we'll make sure everything's going right.
Okay, I'm on share.
And there's nothing like everyone watching you while you're trying to do that. Okay, you got it. So I'm going to turn off my audio and video, and you're going to let you have it.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this forum, and I'm happy to share some reflections about a really remarkable individual, Harry McDonald, whose life and work and contributions to human understanding may not be as well as appreciated as they should be, and so I would like to kind of go over a few things with you about Dr. McDonald. Let's see. Dr. McDonald is well known for having been active in desegregating the schools in Fort Smith. This was in the 1960s, and there was a program of desegregation of the schools. It would take 12 years, going one grade at a time. And Dr. McDonald and some of his friends, mainly in the local chapter of the NAACP, thought that really was a bit pokey. And so the Fort Smith School Board was not interested in advancing the schedule of integration of the schools. And so the NAACP sued the Fort Smith School Board in the Sebastian County Circuit Court and lost. They appealed to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and they lost. This slide also shows a picture of Dr. McDonald with some of the students who were interested in attending Northside Fort Smith High School. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the 2 lower courts and ordered the Fort Smith School District to desegregate its senior high schools and do it immediately. The court issued its ruling without hearing oral arguments on a 5-4 vote and said, petitioners are entitled to immediate relief we have emphasized that delays in desegregating public school systems are no longer tolerable. One of the unintended side effects of this action was that, yes, the students, black students, could attend Fort Smith High School, but this meant that Lincoln High School would be closed. And this had its ripple effects. Lincoln High School actually had been a magnet school for black students, including with students being transported in from elsewhere, some as far as Fayetteville, to attend Lincoln High School. The faculty constituted a core of people of gifts and intelligence who were the nucleus of the black community centered on North 6th and 7th Streets. And with the closing of Lincoln School, the teachers were then left without jobs. One teacher, who was reputed to be the best English teacher around, was hired at Fort Smith High School as a librarian. And that was it for Fort Smith High School. Of course, the other thing that happened was that the Fort Smith School Board established another school in Fort Smith. And as you all probably know, one was named North Side, the other was named South Side. The South Side was in a school district which was almost entirely white, and their mascot was the Rebel, and their school colors were Rebel colors of red and gray and so on. You know, so there was very little attempt to mask what was being done. And this was a source of disappointment, and efforts were made to try to correct this, but there were limits to which you know, the community could move in that regard. I would like to just introduce Dr. McDonald and his method of doing things with a story about how the tea room at the Boston store was integrated. The Boston store was the premier department store in town, located on Garrison Avenue at that time, owned and operated by Jerome Nye, who was a great gentleman, great friend, and also by Jerome Nye's son, Randy Nye, who was about my age. And this is such a good story that there are various versions of it, but the first version that I heard was from George McGill, who's now the mayor of Fort Smith. And his account was that Dr. McDonald appeared at the Boston store one day and said that he had come to integrate the tea room. Now, as it sounds, you know, the tea room was a place where shoppers could go and have a cup of tea. It was the apex of gentility in the community at the time. And of course, it was integrated. Now, this was 1963. The sit-in movement had been launched in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960, and Little Rock had had its flurry of sit-ins in November 1962. And Fort Smith business leaders were very interested in avoiding any difficulty. And actually, Harry McDonald and Jerome Nye were both on a mayor's commission to promote friendship between the races, integration, etc. So this was supposedly an easy target for the NAACP, so to speak. So when Dr. McDonald came in, the hostess at the tea room said, "Oh, Dr. McDonald, let me run get to Mr. Nye." So they did, and they brought Mr. Nye up, but Jerome Nye was out that day, and his son Randy Nye appeared. And this story goes that Randy said, "Oh, Dr. McDonald, this is my first day on the job, and I wonder if it'd be possible if you could come back on another day to integrate the tea room." And Harry said, "Well, yes, that would be fine." And so he came back and he discussed it with Jerome and I, and they made arrangements, and it was done. And I put that story in a little piece that appeared in the Sebastian County Historical Society. And after it appeared, I had a phone call from Randy Nye, who was living in the Houston area. And he said, "Taylor, I read your article in the Historical Society Journal, and nobody is going to care anything about this except you and me, but I just want to tell you what really happened." Now, Randy was the only surviving participant in that story at this time, and so his account was of interest. And he said, "I was new on the job at the time, and when when Dr. McDonald came in, he came to my office and we visited, and he sat down and he said, you know that I've been shopping at the Boston store, and my wife have, for the past 15 years. He said, "Yes, sir, I know that." He says, "And I buy all my Hickey Freeman suits here." "Yes, sir, I know that." "My wife gets her Judith Lieber belts here." "Yes, sir, I know that. But we can't eat in the tea room. Is there something we can do about that?" And so Randy conferred with his father, and they proposed to Dr. McDonald, said, "Dr. McDonald, perhaps you and your wife could come to the tea room some afternoon, and you'll be served. A week or two later, come a little bit earlier in the afternoon, and you'll be served. A week or two after that, come at noon. Mrs. Nye and I will join you in the tea room, and we will have lunch together." And so they agreed, and that was done, and the tea room was integrated in that fashion. And when told that story, his children said, "Well, that was the way Dad did things. He tried to avoid confrontation whenever he could." As we'll get to in a moment, that was not always possible. I would like to tell you a little bit about, whoops, if I can get back. How do I get back? Let's see. Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about Harry McDonald's antecedents. He was not a native of Fort Smith. He grew up in South Carolina. His maternal grandfather that you see here, Robert John Palmer, served during Reconstruction in the South Carolina House of Representatives. And on the other side of the family was Harriet, who was the daughter of a South Carolina plantation owner and also a slave owner. The family has done the ancestry search on them, and the Harriet's father was William Francis Deschamps, and you'll see his dates here. He was known as the Major. Actually, Harry McDonald, after retirement, getting a little ahead of the story a bit, but he became interested in his family history and went to France. And the Deschamps family was very cordial and was very happy to share with him what information they had about the Deschamps family. And Harry just noted in passing when he was telling me about that, not all of his relatives who talked to white folks about their family history had such good luck, but the Deschamps family was very helpful. Harry grew up in Sumter, South Carolina, located in the geographic center of South Carolina, about 40% white, about 50% black. He was born in 1923. This was a community which, occupying half of the population of the town, became a fairly well-identified black community with its own little pecking order and its own aristocracy and so on. And this was a meritocracy, if you will, and education was the key to it. and the family of Robert Palmer got into education. They, the son of Robert Palmer opened a mortuary, and his family, through several generations, as far as I know, still operates that mortuary business. Edmund's son, Bob Palmer, inherited the family business, and he and Harry were about the same age. He was Harry's first cousin and best friend, and I happened to meet Bob, whose picture I'll show you here. There is Bob Palmer. He was just, I met him briefly. He was certainly a very cordial, very friendly, very nice fellow. And you would imagine that he would be well liked in his community. This was Harry's, a set of Harry's sibs. As you'll see here, two of the five were medical doctors, and one was a dentist. And the other two had similarly active careers, one of them involved in the foundation of a college. One of the cousins was physician to Martin Luther King, and Coretta Scott King mentioned this when she was replying to Harry McDonald, regretting that she could not attend the ceremony for the Martin Luther King pool and park in Fort Smith. And in this letter, she mentioned in the third paragraph, you might be interested to know that your cousin, Dr. Palmer, was my husband's personal physician, etc. So the family was well established in the Southeast and South Carolina. Harry did well. He was valedictorian of his high school class. He graduated from Morehouse College in Atlanta with honors, and Martin Luther King attended there a few years later. Harry got his MD degree at Meharry in Nashville. He did an internship at Harlem Hospital, and then did his residency in internal medicine at Kansas City General Hospital. And his brother, Bruce McDonald, was in practice in Kansas City, and Harry planned to join him in practice there. This is Harry at a young stage. You know, that's the way they took pictures in those days. But fate intervened in Harry's plans, and it so happened that Theodore Rutledge of Fort Smith came to Kansas City to recruit Harry to come to Fort Smith to practice medicine. And not only to practice medicine, but also they needed someone who would be a leader in the NAACP in Fort Smith. Theodore Rutledge was accompanied by the widow of Dr. Ernest Denard, who had been the only Black doctor in Fort Smith and had died a year earlier in 1948. Theodore Rutledge was persistent, and the upshot was that Harry came to Fort Smith, and actually for 5 years he roomed with Theodore Rutledge's uncle, Seth Rutledge, and who was also president of the NAACP in Fort Smith. Harry was drafted into the Air Force in 1954. When he was stationed in Japan, this gave him some experience in a community in which Jim Crow did not exist, and blacks were treated like whites, and he was treated like a white man. That's an old Jim Crow saying. In the course of getting to Japan, Harry did have an episode in Flagstaff, Arizona, where hotels refused to put him up in a room, and he got the sheriff, and the sheriff came out in the middle of the night and got him a room to stay. So anyway, Harry learned a bit about the ways of the world in his international experience. After returning to Fort Smith, he married Margaret Bowling, This was an arranged marriage, basically. She was from the same area. She was a college professor, very well educated, very well, very bright. And she was described by Yuba Winton, whom I will show to you in a moment, but Yuba was a matriarch in the Black community, and Yuba said she was a fireball. And their daughter, Marah, said she had passion, drive, and ambition, and she could not tolerate any hint of racism. So Harry and Margaret during the 1960s in Fort Smith and 70s were what you would call a power couple, I'm sure. The one problem with this was that Margaret did have a psychiatric illness, which may have been bipolar or manic depressive disease. Her children, Palmer and Marat, told me about that. And eventually, the marriage did not last, and they were divorced. The children were, the youngest daughter, Marat, was fairly young when that happened. For a while, they stayed with their mother, then they stayed with their father. Now, my informant for some of this was Yuba Winton, and I just put a couple of pictures of Yuba to give you an idea. And there Yuba is in action. She was a matriarch who was outspoken, and she was a good friend of my wife, Mary. And so Mary took me over to her house one time, actually not very long before Yuba died. And Yuba was very helpful in giving insights into Harry's role and position. Okay, now let's see. Yuba said race relations were different in Fort Smith than in any place he had ever been before, because in Harry's previous experience in Sumter, South Carolina, there was no problem. Things were fairly stable because the white community was large enough, occupying half the population of the town, that you could fit into the Black community and be perfectly happy and not venture outside. And also when he went to college at Meharry, at Morehouse, and medical school at Meharry, and his internship at Harlem, these were all Black communities. And when he went to Kansas City, he did not encounter any Black-white issues, particularly, certainly not in the Air Force. But Yuba said that civil rights action activities were behind in Fort Smith. Both Blacks and whites, according to Yuba, were lethargic. And she said that Harry was an humble person who fit himself in. And she said he came as an outsider, but he became an insider. One interesting story is that Harry ran for the school board in Fort Smith. Now, at that time, the school board election was conducted at a school board meeting, and whoever happened to come and sit in as an observer of the school board could vote. And they had a vote, and whoever was elected was on the school board. And of course, this was usually a fairly simple, straightforward matter. But Harry, running for election to the school board, thought it would be a good idea to have several of his friends there to support him in this election. So he did. And a number of members of the NAACP showed up for this meeting, which was set for 7 o'clock. Chris Corbin was the superintendent of schools. When he saw how things were shaping up, he announced that the meeting would be delayed for about 30 minutes. And he made a quick call to the Knights of Columbus, who were having a meeting that night. And so told them that he needed them at the school board meeting. And so they came, and then various others came, some, as Harry told me, wearing their bowling outfits, bowling shoes, and so on. And so by the time they had a comfortable majority seated in the room, the meeting was called to order, and Harry was not elected to the school board. David Pryor was governor at the time, and he did appoint Harry to the state school board, if you will, the State Board of Education. And Governor Bill Clinton continued Harry's appointment on the State Board of Education and also in other state activities. And his activities were recognized in the state, as shown here. Harry said in an interview one time, he said, "Life is full of conflicts. It takes guts, patience, time, money, determination, and a certain degree of independence." And Harry was active in the integration of several places in Fort Smith. Pete's Place was an informal cafe about a block from St. Edward Hospital at that time. And when Harry went in there, the owner, Pete, fetched a gun, and Harry was obliged to leave. Harry returned the next day with the Fort Smith City Police, and Pete's Place was integrated with the assistance of the police. He also integrated Creekmore Swimming Pool. This was not easy either. And there were, some of the ploys. I can't remember whether this was a time when the swimming pool was drained or what was done, but eventually the swimming pool was integrated. And also movie theaters. And Harry said that, I could sit in a dark movie theater and I'd be perfectly fine. Everybody would be happy until for some reason the light on the screen changed, and whoever I was sitting next to could see that he was sitting next to me and moved and got away, and they just didn't understand that that would be harmless. Harry's medical practice began in 1949. At that time, Sparks and St. Edward, the two hospitals in town, were for whites only. There was a Twin City hospital which served the blacks. It had no laboratory, no x-ray facilities. There was only one nurse, and so it closed at night. This picture of the Twin City Hospital was built in 1941 by the WPA, and it was expanded in 1957, converted to a nursing home in 1964. It so happened that Father Deloney at St. John's Catholic School for the Blacks on 8th Street in Van Buren got Dr. McDonald on the staff of the Crawford County Hospital when it was built in 1951. At that time, it was built by the county, and it was managed by the Sisters of St. Benedict. Eventually, some changes did occur. The St. Edward administration changed in 1956, and the new administration gave Dr. McDonald privileges at St. Edward. And he was also admitted to the Sebastian County Medical Society in 1956. Now, he was the first black man in Arkansas to be admitted to a county medical society. And when he attended, he related that Dr. Moulton, this was Everett Moulton, who was an ophthalmologist, was the only one who would sit by him, but he came over and sat by him. So it was a little bit of slow going. Sparks in 1961 admitted Dr. McDonald to its staff and began admitting black patients. And St. Edward began admitting blacks to the same floors as whites, but maintained segregation within its rooms. So integration was slow and stepwise, but it did occur. Later on, Harry McDonald became the head of the family practice section at St. Edward, and also he was elected president of the Sebastian County Medical Association. A friend and colleague of Dr. McDonald's was Tommy Foltz, and he covered Dr. McDonald's practice whenever he took a day off or when he was out of town. This was how I knew Harry McDonald was in medical practice. He would, when he referred patients to me, I made it a point. I saw him immediately that afternoon, or whenever they wanted to come in. I saw him right away and got a report to him on his patients. And I would bump into him sometimes at St. Edward Hospital late at night. Late at night, making rounds in the hospital, say 9 or 10 o'clock, something like that. The normal thing to do is to get your rounds made, get through and get home as quick as you can. But paradoxically, that sometimes if you bump into somebody at the nursing station, you may just sit and talk for several minutes, mainly shop talk or just about this, that, and the other. And Harry and I had conversations there. I was, I guess, telling his daughter Mariah about that later on, and Mariah said, "Oh, well, Dad would sometimes take me when he made evening rounds, and he would park in the parking lot and tell me to just sit there for a minute. He'd be right back." And I would sit and wait for him, and I thought he was busy seeing patients, and all the time he was just sitting there shooting the bull with you. So at least it served as a way of interchange. An interesting thing happened when the city decided that it would name its park after Martin Luther King. This was not without discussion in the city council. Reverend G. Edward West was a African-American minister at that time, and he made a motion that the new city park be named for Dr. McDonald, who was actually attending the meeting with a number of voters. But this was after the council had had voted against naming it for Martin Luther King. And so Harry McDonald declined to have it named for him, saying that if they wouldn't rename the park for as great a national figure as Dr. King, he didn't want it named for him. And then some of the directors reconsidered. One of them was Bill Vines, who said, "Your feelings against naming the park for a local man are apparently stronger than mine feelings against naming it for Dr. King." And he made a motion to reconsider, and eventually it was named for Dr. King. But one upshot of that is that nothing in Fort Smith, no schools or public facilities are named for Dr. McDonald, which would certainly not be inappropriate if it were ever done, but that may be long past time. This is a picture of Dr. McDonald when he retired in 1990. This is how I like to remember Harry. He was wearing his white linen suit. He was obviously having a good time at his retirement. He had a radiant smile, and he was talking with two of his friends. This was a great moment. I have a few pictures from that were taken from his scrapbook. Governor Clinton was the speaker at that on that occasion, and Bill Clinton and Harry McDonald were friends. And I will just fast forward a little bit to the time when Harry, in his old age in 2012 or so, was about to die, was not too long from dying in his old age. And his daughters made arrangements for Bill Clinton to call and speak to Harry on the telephone. And this took place, and all of you know how Bill Clinton could do well with a conversation like that, and he did on this occasion. And he recalled what had happened, which was that Harry McDonald, back in, maybe the 60s or 70s, got Bill Clinton inducted into the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People at Malibu Methodist Church in Fort Smith. And so when Clinton called Dr. McDonald, he said, "Harry, you took me up when I was nobody from nowhere, didn't know anybody, had no money, and you made me a member of the NAACP. And when I ran for president, I was able to tell them that I had been a member of the NAACP for 29 years. And of course, Harry was very pleased with that. Bill Clinton did make an address at Harry's retirement. These are some photographs showing Yuba Winton when she was younger on one of these, and also Bill Clinton speaking. This was George McGill speaking on this occasion in 1990. He is the one whom I referred to as the mayor of Fort Smith at the present time. And I'm very happy to show you this picture that shows me in the picture to the left. It's not too hard to spot which one I am in a white seersucker, a light colored seersucker suit. The man in the dark suit back there is Sheriff Gary Grimes. And that also is me with my wife Mary behind at Dr. McDonald's retirement celebration on this occasion. His wife and Charlotte Tidwell unveiled a picture of Harry with his 4 children. And these are photographs of Harry on one occasion with his wife and his 3 daughters. And over on the right, you can't see that very well, with his son Palmer. This is Harry's second wife, Ruby. After the divorce, in later years, he married Ruby Bultman. This too was an arranged marriage. She was a distant cousin. She was from South Carolina. She also was an educator. Friends and family arranged for them to meet. This was a very nice match. She was more on the quiet side than her predecessor, Ruby, had been. Harry's first wife had been. So this was she survived Harry, and this was a happy marriage. This is a picture of Harry after he retired. This was from the newspaper in Sumter, South Carolina, and he was musing on his career in Fort Smith. Of course, one thing is, why did Harry leave Arkansas and leave Fort Smith? He had had his career there. Had been there from 1949 to 1990, and I don't know that I asked Harry that question, but one can imagine that it's difficult to maintain the position. Harry was, of course, tired and fatigued from his labors. And I think he was afraid that he would not get very much rest in retirement. I've made the comment that a halo can be as heavy as a crown, and Harry wanted to really just get some rest and do something else. So he left Fort Smith. I did run into Harry one time. And this was quite a coincidence. It was at St. Andrews by the Sea Methodist Church in Hilton Head, North Carolina. This was about 1995. My family and I were there for staying in a timeshare for a couple of weeks, something we at that time were doing every year. And I remember my son-in-law asking me that morning, says, would it be okay if I wear a polo shirt, golf shirt to church this morning? Well, in those days, it was not so frequent as it is today, but I said, oh yeah, there's no chance you'll see anybody you know. And it so happened as we were sitting in the church that morning, I looked around and I saw Harry McDonald, and he was there with his cousin Bob, who had a place at Hilton Head. So I visited with him afterward. And Harry was telling me about his activities. He was doing some missionary work in Haiti from time to time. He was doing some genealogy work, which I referred to, which I alluded to. He was also enjoying playing golf. At that time, I think, well, he had moved to South Carolina and he moved to Texas, where he lived with one of his daughters. He eventually moved to Washington State, where he lived with his youngest daughter. But in that conversation with Harry, and afterwards, I reflected that there were several things that Harry and I had in common. We were both born in the segregated rural South. We both came to Fort Smith to practice medicine, and we were both descended from white Southern slave owners. And so that gave me food for thought. This is a picture of Harry in his older years. His children told me that he actually had cancer of the prostate and multiple myeloma, and he had not expected ill health. His parents had lived to be fairly old, and this came as a surprise to him, and he was rather sad about it. This photograph, which the family used in his his funeral observances and so on, I think reflects some sadness. I personally think, and nobody told me this, but I think that he was a little bit sad about the limits of what he had been able to do, and all the work that still needed to be done to advance equality of opportunity and better relations between the races. This was a series of photographs of Harry throughout his life, which I showed you, showing the lifetime of someone who, in conclusion, he always knew who he was. He was an agent for change, and he was a force for good. He was on a mission, and his mission field was Fort Smith. And if there are any questions or observations, I'll be happy to respond.
Dr. Prewitt, thank you very much. I am going to stop your share so we can see you more clearly. And appreciate your presentation on Dr. McDonald. He just sounds like a wonderful person. And I have a question. If you do have questions for Dr. Prewitt, if you would just type them in the chat, and then we can read those aloud and have Dr. Prewitt answer those. While we're waiting on that, you mentioned when he gained privileges at the two hospitals in Fort Smith, were there any issues of him being a Black doctor? And did he deal with white patients at the hospitals, or at the beginning did he just focus exclusively on Black patients?
Yeah, that's a good question. For basically the whole time that Harry was in Fort Smith, he was the only Black doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case anymore. He retired in 1990. But during the time that he was here, he was basically the doctor for the Black community. As I mentioned, I shared some patients with him that he referred to me for one thing or another, and a few others. But basically, he worked night and day taking care of his constituency, which was the Black community. I really am not aware of any white people who saw Harry. And I would say if it happened, it was the exception.
Okay. We have one question that came in. How big of a practice did Dr. McDonald have in Fort Smith?
Well, as I said before, I think it was basically the entire Black community. The Black community constituted about 10% of the population of Fort Smith. He did well enough in his practice that he dressed well. He lived in a house that was nice. That was one of the little problems, was that Harry was bitterly disappointed that when he attempted to buy a nice house in a white neighborhood on more than one occasion, this was resisted by the homeowners buying the house or making some resistive move. And this really hurt his feelings, particularly at one time he was hoping to buy a house where a number of doctors lived, and was very surprised that there was opposition there. He wound up buying a house in this black section of town, so to speak. It was about the size of 6 lots. He occupied about 3 of those with his house. The other 3, I don't know what happened with them. So he did fine. He was busy as he could be, and his practice was remunerative to him. One interesting thing that I did not mention is that he would take a vacation every summer. And his son Palmer told me that he always took the same vacation. First week was at the National Medical Association, which was the black version of the American Medical Association. And he'd take the whole family with that. And Palmer said that was the only opportunity as a boy that he ever had to associate with other middle-class black children. The second week, Harry would go by himself to a hotel in the Bahamas. He always went to the same hotel, and he enjoyed going there because there was no discrimination against him as a black. They knew who he was. And it's interesting that this was the way in which he decompressed, and that was his yearly vacation.
When you saw him, when you ran into him at the church in Hilton Head, did he express any, maybe not regrets, might not be the right word, but did he miss living in Fort Smith and being a doctor in Fort Smith, or was he pretty happy after he left Fort Smith?
My impression was that he seemed very happy. He was retired for 5 years at that time. His health was still good. And I was really very happy to see him. As we say, he looked good.
Good. I'm glad. He deserved a good retirement and a relaxful retirement after all he did in Fort Smith.
I thought so, yeah.
If we have any more questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. And while we're waiting, I'll remind you, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but this program and all the other programs are recorded. And so if you'd like to rewatch this, or if you want to forward it to a friend of yours who missed it today, this will be uploaded to YouTube probably in about 1 to 2 weeks, probably. And then that's where all of our previous programs are as well. So you can actually watch the very first stay-at-home lecture up to the most recent one. And that if you go to YouTube and just type in History of Medicine or SHMHP, it'll come up and you'll be able to find it. So, well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So Dr. Prewitt, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it and enlightening us on the career of Dr. McDonald.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone take care, and we'll see you next month, December 5th and hear a presentation on Dr. G. Thomas Jansen. So everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, Dr. Prewitt.
Thank you.